Hello everybody. Today for my first video in the channel, I will be laying out my own DCU lineup that I created in my spare time. This lineup is inspired by the DCEU, DCU, and multiple content creators, and of course, my own ideas. It isn't perfect, but I worked on it very hard, and I hope you enjoy it. It's mostly going to be a 20-year plan for my own DCU that's going to have multiple event films, multiple solo projects, and multiple franchises. It's not perfect, of course, as I already said, but I've worked very hard on it, so I hope you guys enjoy it.
Now, before I begin explaining the different projects in this lineup, I'll first begin telling you that my lineup is going to be split into 4 chapters, which will be split into a video each. With this first video only explaining the first chapter. Each chapter would last about 5 years each. Chapter 1 of this 4-chapter lineup will be titled Justice, and it will focus on the formation of the Justice League. It will consist of 13 films and 2 television shows, which I know sounds like a lot, but remember, this is a dream lineup and not really supposed to be realistic. Though I do encourage you to give me your thoughts and post about what you would change in my lineup.
Now we begin with the lineup, which would start on year one, with the Trinity, of course. The Trinity obviously being Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman. A lot of people would probably say, "Oh, Leo, wouldn't you start with Superman?" And I'm like, no, I wouldn't start with Superman or Batman. I'd start with Wonder Woman. Mainly because I want Superman and Batman to come out during summer and October, mainly for vibes reasons. But Wonder Woman fits perfectly in the early parts of the year, and it's mostly going to be very similar to the real life movie, of course, without Gal Gadot, because Gal Gadot's kind of a, but she's not really that. You know what I mean? She's kind of a bad person to an extent, and a lot of people don't really like her acting. I don't really care that much about Gal Gadot with that. It does have some really weird stuff. But yeah, it's gonna be very similar. It's gonna be set in World War One, and it's gonna be our first introduction to the DCU. It's gonna, especially since this is a DCU that's very based on the James Gunn's DCU, which means it's gonna have kind of the same backstory of like 300 years ago, humanity first discovered the metahuman. Of course, beforehand, metahumans existed forever during this universe, but humanity only discovered the metahuman around 300 years ago. So in this movie, they're gonna know that Wonder Woman is a metahuman, and the big change in this movie would be that the twist at the end, with the Ares twist of Ares being the main villain and all that, not gonna exist in this movie. It's just not gonna be because it kind of just diminished the original movie. It's one of the few things that really destroyed that, not destroyed, but at least took away from that original movie. And I really liked the original movie, but I remember even when I was a little kid and I watched it for the first time, I didn't really like that twist. So yeah, that's gonna be the change.
So now instead I decided that the big bad for the first Wonder Woman movie would be Vandal Savage, who would have orchestrated the events of World War One. I know that Vandal Savage isn't normally a Wonder Woman villain, but since I decided to make him the main villain of the first chapter of this universe, I wanted to introduce him early on in this lineup.
But yeah, it's gonna be Wonder Woman. She's going to be played by a young actress. Mainly, all three of the Trinity actors in this universe, which doesn't exist, would be played by very young actors, very early 20s. Mainly because I am going to have them here for 20 years. They're gonna sign some diabolical contract. Some diabolical contracts for 20 years. You're gonna be in any project I tell you to be. Obviously, this is unrealistic, and and there's and you might be like, Leonardo, that makes no sense. They wouldn't sign that. Obviously, they wouldn't sign that. But this is a fictional universe that doesn't exist. So, plus you could also say that they got recasted, which I'm perfectly fine with in this fictional universe that doesn't exist. But getting on with that, with the DCU kind of being established with Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman being our first character introduced, we would go on to the true and real like introduction to the full DC universe in its current state and current age, Superman, which would basically follow the same plot as the real movie. The only change being that Clark would be 300 months old, aka 25 years old, because I don't really like the idea of Clark being 30 in the movie. I like I remember I was searching up the timelines for all the movies that I was adapting and changing and all that stuff, and I realized that in the Batman and in Superman, both Bruce and Clark are 30 years old. That's a little too late. I like my Superman and Batman to start at around 25. Of course, in this movie, Superman would be in his third year, which would mean that the Superman started being Superman around when he was 22 or 23, which I don't really find that annoying because obviously Superman, there's multiple different versions of him, and Primary Day, the Superboy stuff of him actually becoming a superhero when he was a teenager and calling himself Superboy. So him starting out early is pretty fine. But yeah, he would be 25 in this movie. Krypton would have exploded 30 years ago, but because of weird space shenanigans, it took Clark's ship 5 years to get to Earth. So we'd still have that whole 3 connection at the start, because I still want this movie to basically be the same as the original. Basically, no changes. It still establishes everything. Oh, but the main big change that I would have is Rick Flag Sr. does not appear in this movie, and all of his every single part of him being like the Argus director, and all of his lines, including that last line of him being scared of metahumans taking over, right, is going to go to Amanda Waller, which is going to be very important because Amanda Waller is going to be one of the main antagonists during the first 10 years, which you could call the first saga or the first phase. Not really a phase, since there's going to be only 20 years in this. I could eventually expand it to 30. I have bunch of ideas for 30, but that's mostly going to be for another day. For now, I have a full lineup for 20 years. But yeah, Amanda Waller is going to be running Argus, and she's going to be introduced in this movie, and she's going to take up all the space that Rick Flag Sr. originally took up. And that's basically the movie. It's going to be, obviously, Lex Luthor, main antagonist, is going to have Ultraman. It's going to have pretty much the same plot as the original. It's going to tease Supergirl at the end. And you might be like, oh, Leo, doesn't this just end up being just the same DCU with some changes? It's kind of going to be like that, but trust me, there's going to be a lot of changes in the future. After Superman, we would have the final movie of the year, which would be The Batman, which would pretty much be the same as the real one. And you might be like, Leonardo, really? Just the same movie? Kinda, yeah. Just obviously the change would be that Bruce would be 26 in this movie. He'd be in his second year, which by timeline wise, this would mean that Bruce would probably be around 2 years older than Clark, which I find perfectly fine. I actually really like the idea of Bruce being 2 years older than Clark. And I like that because I only like when Batman starts being Batman around 25 years old. Because I don't like when he starts being Batman a little later. Like, I don't like that he started being Batman at like 28 when in the Batverse, in the Reeseverse, which obviously isn't connected to the DCU, sadly. Because I would really like if they were connected, but that's not what I'm talking about here. The movie would follow the same plot. Riddler would be the main villain. He would guide Batman in some weird game, and obviously it would end up killing Carmine Falcone, with Catwoman being the secondary main character. And the movie would pretty much be the same, just that Bruce Wayne would be younger, and it would end on a scene of Bruce Wayne and Alfred going to a circus together, which obviously sets up Robin. And you might be like, Leonardo, you're talking too much, but this is my first video. You know how I do. But yeah, that'd be the first year. The first year's lineup would just be the Trinity, which obviously would start with the flashback movie of Wonder Woman. Then we would have the big event movie of Superman, which would just set up the DCU 100%. Then we have a much more self-contained story of the Batman, which would work as itself as that way. But that being the year number one, just establishing the universe, establishing 3 of our main players for the rest of the 20 years. And that's it. Now I'm going on to year 2.
Year 2 would also have 3 projects. It would have 1 TV show and 2 movies. The first project would be Lanterns. The show would follow a rookie Lantern, Jon Stewart, being taught by Hal Jordan while they try to solve a mystery on Earth. The show would end with Hal Jordan dying because of Parallax, setting up the Sinestro Corps, and they would also have a big part in setting up the Blackest Night prophecy, which would eventually be explored later on in future projects. Supergirl, which would come out during summer of this year, would be a straightforward adaptation of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, with Lobo added on. To end this year off, we would have The Flash, a movie centering on a seasoned Barry Allen as he teaches his nephew Wally West the ways of being a superhero. The main villain of the movie would be Gorilla Grodd, who would be trying to take over Gorilla City with the help of the Rogues, who wouldn't fully know the full scope of his plan. We'd end the movie teasing Vandal Savage freeing Gorilla Grodd from his containment, which would set up the future Justice League movie. The movie would also have various teases for the existence of the Reverse Flash. Now moving on to year 3, this year we would focus on all the Trinity getting their sequels. Wonder Woman's movie would be sort of an adaptation to the story The Lies by Greg Rucka, and it would focus on Diana coming out of retirement during the current day and returning to Themyscira. The movie would introduce the Cheetah and Donna Troy. Man of Tomorrow would come out in the summer, and it would be a team-up film between Superman and Lex Luthor as they must battle Brainiac. The movie would end with Superman discovering the existence of the bottled Kryptonian city of Kandor. The movie would also introduce the Martian Manhunter. And we'd obviously end the year on the Batman and Robin, a movie all about the dynamic of duo of Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson, who would be 13 in this movie, which takes place around the same time as the first Superman movie. This movie would primarily focus on Bruce
who has been slowly becoming increasingly reliant to the point of addiction on a toxic known as venom. The movie would end with Robin and Alfred finally being able to get Bruce to give up on the toxin. The movie would also introduce rogues such as Harley Quinn, Deadshot, and Killer Croc, while also teasing future villains Ra's al Ghul and Bane.
Now we're going on to the fourth year. The first project of year 4 would be Doom Patrol, a mini-series which would follow a similar plot to the real-life show, with the main difference being that instead of Cyborg, we have a 12-year-old Beast Boy as one of our central characters. After Doom Patrol, the first big event movie of this lineup would be World's Finest, a team-up film between the dynamic duo and the Man of Tomorrow. The main villain would be Ra's al Ghul, who's manipulating Bizarro, formerly known as Ultraman, to do his bidding. The explanation behind Bizarro's weird changes would be that when Superman sent him into the black hole, it fundamentally changed his genetics, morphing him into an inverse of Superman. During this film, Batman would sleep with Talia, setting up Damian. We'd end the year off on Suicide Squad, which would follow Harley Quinn on her first mission with the squad, which would consist of Harley, Rick Flag, Boomerang, Enchantress, Deadshot, and Bronze Tiger, with of course some cannon fodder characters as well. The movie would build up to her finally deciding to separate from the Joker as her experiences with the squad change her. The movie ends with Bronze Tiger sacrificing his life to save the rest of the squad, which would have been the final nail to Harley's development. Now we move on to year 5. We start out the year with Supergirl 2, in which we would follow Kara as she explores the bottled city of Kandor and discovers that General Zod and his subordinates have taken over the city and have been ruling it ever since they were captured by Brainiac. She is forced to face off against General Zod for the freedom of the city, defeating him by sending him into the Phantom Zone. The next movie in the lineup would be the big event that these 5 years have been building up to, Justice League. And the roster of this league would consist of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and Hawkgirl. The plot of the movie would begin with the mysterious disappearance of Kid Flash, Supergirl, Donna Troy, and all the Justice Gang members, save for Hawkgirl and Martian Manhunter. John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, and Hawkgirl would enlist the help of the best detective they know, Batman, to figure out what is happening. As Batman, John Jones, and Hawkgirl begin to investigate the strange occurrence, other heroes who are also looking into the disappearance join in on the investigation. The heroes would discover that the culprits behind it are Vandal Savage and Gorilla Grodd, who have just stolen the high-tech cyborg Amazo and are planning to take over the world. The gathered heroes are forced to work together to defeat Vandal Savage, Gorilla Grodd, and the android Amazo. The battle would prove difficult, since both Grodd and Savage would prove to be very powerful adversaries, and the android Amazo would have copied the abilities of the captured heroes. But the new team of heroes are victorious in the end. After the battle is over, and the heroes have freed everyone, they decide that it would be best suited to themselves to create a league so that whenever the world is put in such a hardship again, they can stop it together. They decide to call themselves the Justice League. Post-credit scene of the movie would involve Luthor getting a hold of Amazo's body. To end the year and the chapter off, we would tell the story of Barbara Gordon and how she became Batgirl. The main two antagonists of this movie would be Firefly and Killer Moth. That would be the lineup for my first chapter, Justice. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any specific thoughts or feelings about the lineup or any criticisms, feel free to comment them down below. And lots of thanks for watching the video.